strategies that we can use to reduce financial stress. So historically, there have been a range of factors that are going to predict economic stress for individuals and family. One is reduced income. So if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, having high debt to income ratio, having unstable work. So some people are unemployed, some people are underemployed, and some people live in communities where there's just not a lot of job opportunities available. And as I said before, just the inability to pay one's bills. So when we look at a historical perspective of family economic stress studies, some of the earlier studies looked at families who were going through the Great Depression, and these researchers wanted to know how are families able to cope with the loss of household income and the stress that's associated with being unemployed. So they found that flexible and adaptable families tend to do better during economic times. And so in these families, there's a lot of interdependence, and people are able to kind of change their family roles. So for instance, if you have a man who says, you know, I'm the head of the household, I don't want my wife to work or my children to work, and I'm only going to, you know, work one job, then that family is not going to be as flexible as a family that says, you know, we're going to pull together as a family, we're all going to try to work and, you know, get multiple jobs if we need to, and we'll pull our resources and our skills together so that our family can overcome an economic hardship. So those families are more flexible. So when we look at the economic pressures on the family, there's a lot of things that are going to impact this. It's going to affect children within the family. Spousal conflict is going to be affected by, you know, if you can't pay your bills, if you're always arguing over money. Sibling relationships, because some of us may have brothers and sisters that we loan money to. They may not pay us our money back. That is going to cause us financial stress. Parenting functioning. So if you are a young parent raising young children, maybe you don't have the resources as an older parent who is in their, you know, 30s or 40s, who's more established. If you're a grandparent having to raise your grandchildren, you'll hear a lot of grandparents say that I wasn't expecting for us to raise our grandkids, and we were like saving for a retirement. And so now you may have young children that you're going to have to be responsible for, you know, for the next, you know, 15 to 20 years. So also looking at families' economic growth. What is your ability to save and invest your money? Will you have enough money for retirement? And can you provide money to help your children get whatever type of education attainment that they desire? And also, do you have the ability to purchase a home or purchase, you know, properties for investments? So when you think about the totality of all of this, this causes a lot of economic stress for us. So I looked at an article in Time Magazine, and Richard Reeves, he's the director of the Future of the Middle Class Initiative at the Brooklyn Institute. And he says that what financial management, family stress, what it really boils down to is, can people afford the 3 H's: housing, healthcare, and higher education? So let's look at housing across the US. So we know that the interest rates are high right now. We know that a lot of people cannot afford to buy houses because of the high interest rate. So I wanted us to just kind of look in different states at the housing market. So here I found a house in California. You see that the house on the right is well over $1 million. It's, you know, about 2,000 square feet. And then the house on the left is valued at $625,000, and it is just barely over 1,000 square feet. So we know your ability to purchase a house and the type of home that's going to be available to you is going to depend on where you're located in the country, where you're located even within your own state, whether you're living in urban communities or rural communities. So in North Carolina, a house that's $500,000 in today's market, you see it's a 2-bedroom, has about 1,000 square feet. Then there's another house that's $229,000, 3-bedroom, a little under 2,000 square feet. And then if we look at Texas, we see that some houses are worth $1 million. But the point of this is to say that in today's market, people are paying more for less house, less land in some places as well. And looking in Kentucky, you'll see one house is on the market for $249,000, and there's a house that's $1 million that has 6,000 square feet compared to the one in California that we saw that had 2,000 square feet. So I've been talking to, some of my friends and relatives who are thinking about either selling their home or purchasing their home for the first time. So I kind of talked about in 2020, when we looked at the mortgage rates, the interest rate was probably the lowest that it had been in quite a while. So 2.3%, we look at purchasing a home for $200,000 with the ability of putting at least 10% down on that house. And you see that the interest rate, the interest paid is going to be about $69,000. And then when we look at the same scenario in the year 2023, where the interest rate today is 6.87%, and for the same price range, the interest rate is you're going to pay about $246,000 in interest. So the difference is you're going to overpay in interest. So it's going to be $176,000. So we're looking at, people are going to be paying more in interest. So houses are going to cost you more. And I think a lot of times, we don't really think about how the interest rate is really going to affect our ability to purchase a home. So even if you can afford the house payment, you're still going to be paying more for your house in the long run. And so let's talk about divorce. And particularly, I want to talk about women and divorce when it comes to financial stress. So fidelity is one of the biggest reasons why people get divorced, but behind infidelity. But behind infidelity is the high debt rate that some couples may have. So sometimes when people are married, they don't have the same financial priorities. So there's a mismatch there. And so you tend to have one partner or both partners who may overspend. They may have impulse buying. They may have a high credit card debt, or they may just have the inability to compromise about how we're going to spend this money. And this can lead to divorce. So when we look at the economic impact of divorce on women, women are going to have about a 20% decline in income and their living standards compared to men. And they also may have inadequate child support. So when we look at having to provide for your children, people say, well, there's child support from the father, but depending on the father's income, it could be inadequate. And also a father can refuse to pay child support. And so that mother may have to take that father to court. There are some men who get paid under the table, which means they have jobs where they get paid in cash. And so that won't be calculated into child support. And a lot of women try to hold on to homes that they can't really afford because they don't want to disrupt their children. And that has an economic impact on them as well. Then for women who are not in the labor market, returning to work with limited skills, that is also going to be a stressor for you, trying to find a job that you can do where you can realistically pay all of your bills. Also looking at the high cost of healthcare. So if you had healthcare through your husband, and if you no longer have that opportunity, then you're going to have to pay for a family plan, which can be expensive. And then there are some women who are unaware of the debt that their husband may have. So there's some women whose husbands, take care of all of the financial needs, so they don't know about mortgage debt, credit card debt, hidden loans that, your husband could have taken out, also loans to family members. And there are some people who get cars for their siblings, get other properties for their parents. And so if you don't have good communication with your spouse, these may be situations that you don't know about your financial situation. So we also have grandparents raising grandchildren. And so most grandparents who are raising grandchildren are going to be in their 50s or above. And so some of the reasons that grandparents might raise their grandchildren include drug addiction, and in states where there's a high rate of opioid prescription abuse, you're going to see parents who are going to jail or prison, so their parents are going to be responsible for the grandchildren. Teen pregnancy is also an issue. So most young parents are inexperienced, and the grandparents have to raise their grandchildren. Incarcerated parents, this is typically going to be for grandparents who have a daughter, because most children tend to live with their mothers. If there's a case of child abuse and neglect, that's usually going to be due to substance abuse. And then military deployment. So you could have one parent or both parents who are deployed, and then the grandparent is going to have to be responsible. And so you'll hear some grandparents say, again, that they weren't planning to raise their grandchildren at 50 or 60. They were planning to retire, to travel, and just to have time as a couple. So when we look at who is raising grandchildren, it tends to be primarily white couples, followed by Black couples, and then Hispanic couples. So another area that's going to cause a lot of financial stress is loaning money to family members. So some of the complications of loaning money to family members is that this causes us to overextend our personal finances. Most of us will not have any type of written agreement. These agreements are usually informal. And when it comes to loaning money to your parents and your sibling, sometimes these types of loans are going to be discreet. So you may not even know that your partner or your spouse is loaning money to his or her brothers and sisters. And also close family friends could be included in this as well. And there can be multiple requests to borrow money. So you could have a sibling who constantly borrows money for whatever reason. And for some of us, it's very difficult for us to say no to our parents or to our siblings if they're in financial needs. So this causes a complicated situation. So Mary, I'm going to ask if you have, any questions right now, you or Sid, because I know that we're doing this video, but just if there's anything that has emerged for you from what I've discussed so far, and I'll answer those questions.
So you're talking about your friends and family that are looking into buying houses right now. Have they decided against it because of the interest rate? Or are they still looking at it?
Yeah, so I have a few that say that they want to go in and buy a house because some of them are renting and it's still going to be cheaper for them. That's the way that they're thinking, but I have others who understand that paying all of paying all of that interest over time is not really saving them money over time. In the short time, it may seem like, it's cheaper for me to pay the mortgage rate instead of paying for rent. Because in some places, I have a friend who's in Boston. She has a small apartment. It's like $2,300. So, in some of these areas, it's critical for people to look into home ownership. But the interest rate, a lot of realtors are telling people if you can hold out, don't do it. Yes. And then when I'm thinking about going back to the divorce, I have a really close friend who recently became someone who is divorced, and she had no clue about some of the financial means that her ex-husband had. So he had hidden money in another state, and she didn't know it. He worked overseas, and so she was just saying how she didn't really pay attention to her finances, and she was like, I just expected for him to do it. And a lot of times in relationships, there's either one partner or the other partner who's going to manage the finances. And I would just say that's important to know about your financial situation. Absolutely. So when it comes to reducing financial stress, financial planning is very important, and especially creating a family budget. And so when I teach marriage and the family, I always tell my students that it's important to discuss money, because a lot of times we don't. I think it's important to look at the money management behavior of that your partner's family of origin. How do they handle money? Do they overspend? And do your financial behaviors, do they match up? So it's important. So discuss what items need to be on your budget. And as Dave Ramsey would say, all of your spending areas should be on your budget. So your car repair, entertainment, grocery shopping, insurance, anything that you're spending money on should be on your monthly budget so that you can make your money work for you. Create a plan to tackle your debt, because sometimes when you're young, you want to just kind of just pay your bills as they come in, but you really need to try to pay, extra on your credit cards if you can, extra on your car payment if you can, to try to reduce your debt. And then building a savings plan, for emergencies, for college, if you plan to take vacations, have an account where you can put money in that so that you can plan that as well. And then think about multiple streams of income. So, can you get a second job? Can you turn a hobby into a business? Can you get rental property? Just think, what is a way that we can create another stream of income? And there's an old saying that you'll never get rich working for someone. So you have to remember that the more streams of income we have, the more we can get ourselves out of debt, and the more we can save money, to retire and to live the life that is comfortable for us. And so that's all I have. And so if, like I said, if you have any other questions that you can think of that, I know, Sid, you said that your students might be watching this, so if you can think of any questions.
So we have in the class, Katrina, a mantra. It's actually a two-part mantra. The first mantra is ERA, early, regularly, and aggressively. And the mantra is like this: you should practice sound financial responsibility and practices early in life, pursue it regularly and aggressively. You should save early in life, pursue it regularly and aggressively. You should spend with reason, meaning we're all going to spend money, right? We're going to spend money, whether we're spending money on paying a car payment or insurance payment or junk from China, we're going to spend money, right? But do it, make sure that you're practicing good habits early, regular, aggressively. ERA. What is your take on that? Like, do you endorse that mentality of ERA?
Yeah, I think that's a good practice to have. My dad was asking me, how do kids today learn how to budget and pay bills, because everything is electronic. And I never really thought about that. And I asked my own daughter, now that she's out on her own, I was like, do you think I prepared you on how to pay bills? And she was like, no. She was like, I really didn't understand like how much it takes to live on your own, like paying your utilities, the water bill, the electric, paying your rent, having renters and insurance. And she was like, I just didn't, really understand what that really entails. And so I think some of the old fashioned ways of like writing things down helps. I mean, you could type up your budget, but you really have to think about like, where are you spending your money and where can you save?
So exactly. So we have the first part of the mantra, which is ERA, early, regular, aggressively. Guess what the second part is?
What?
Is recovery is key. And I always tell students, as you'll remember, we're never going to be perfect all the time. We're going to mess
Mhm.
up. It's just human nature to mess up. Well, don't wallow around in the mess up. Get up, get back on track again, and just plow forward. You know, fix the problem, and move on. Recovery is key. Instead of just sitting there wallowing around, and it's just realize that you've made a mistake, get back up, do it again, and go back to sound financial practices.
Yes, I think people should definitely understand that budgets can be modified, and that, if you've overspent in one area, then you need to look in another area and see, how can I reduce my spending? Like, do I have to eat out every day? Do I have to go to Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee when I can make coffee at home and, save that money? And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to have a balance to where you're not overspending.
Right. So I have one other quick question for you. And I admit up front, I have not done my homework on this, but I have a lot of students who are asking about the student loan debt, student debt relief program. Can you give us a little snapshot of that? What's involved in it? If it's going to happen? Again, I admit I have not done my homework on this, but I'd like to, while we have you here, just ask you what your thoughts are on it. And what advice could you give students who are interested in learning more about this, and how it might help them?
I'm not an expert, but I think so there is the student loan forgiveness that Biden is trying to do, where people who make, I guess, under a certain amount of money get to have either $10,000 or $20,000 forgiven off of their loan. And I think that will help many people who have been affected by COVID, especially. And I don't think, if you remember when Michelle Obama was saying, before they became living in the White House, that they could hardly pay their bills at times, that like their student loans were as high as their mortgage. And
Wow.
so I think the relief that it's going to give some people is really good. And I think that students should be aware of some of the loan forgiveness programs, like if you work for a nonprofit, if you're a teacher, if you're a nurse. So if you're in certain industries, if you have, I think it's 120 on-time payments over the course of 10 years, then your student loans will be forgiven. So I think it's important for them to just check with their lender to find out. And for those who have private loans, they will not qualify for any of these forgiveness programs. So you have to have your loans through the U.S. Department of Education. And from what I understand on the loan forgiveness that Biden is doing, it also includes the Parent Plus loans. So a lot of parents have taken out loans to help their kids offset. And some parents are struggling because, the rates for student loans are also higher, and it's an additional debt that they're taking on as well.
Mhm. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you. Do you know if there's a place on campus where they can go and get some information? Would they
I'd
be able
say,
to get it at the student financial aid office?
yeah, I would say financial aid office is the place to go. The U.S. Department of Education, on their website, they have information as well. And then whoever is holding their student loans, that organization should be able to give them information as well. Yeah.
Great.
And for students who are in high school, I think it's important for them to do the FAFSA, the counseling that's offered. So, and I think because of that, you see a lot of students who have decided that either they're going to take a gap year, work, save some money, or they're going to go to junior college, where it's less expensive than coming to a four-year institution. And I think it's really important. Some of my colleagues and I were talking about when we were applying for loans in the 80s and the 90s, that we didn't have the counseling that they have today about, like, what does it entail So I remember going to the bank with my parents, and the bank manager that was going over the application with us was saying that you could get X amount of money, but they never said that you don't have to take the full amount, but they made it seem like you did. And I had a business law class in high school, and I remember reading, and I remember telling my parents that I don't think I really want to sign this. And my dad was like, do you want to go to school or what? Because they're from a different generation. And so had I better understood the terms, I probably would not have signed. I probably would have chosen to just work a little bit longer, or, or do a work study program, at my college. So just reading and understanding, I think it's really important for students. And I'm glad that they have the financial counseling available, so the students can see that you should only take out what you absolutely need, and then how the interest works, and then how your student loan payments are going to work. Because, prior to, I guess, maybe the last 5 years or so, that wasn't available to us.
That's right. That's exactly right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You mentioned earlier about how COVID had affected some of this student loan debt, or that was maybe the catalyst for the new plan. Can you talk a little bit more about how COVID affected families financially?
Yeah, some families, people lost their jobs during COVID with the shutdown. Some people lost their businesses as well. And then we would expect that people had to dip into their savings, to make it through these times, loan family members, other friends money. And so some people took a hit, especially those who could not work from home. And so I think this taught us as a nation that we probably need to do things a little differently, for sure.
Do you have any specific advice around inflation? So I know that's a big issue that affects everybody right now. So what would you have to say on that topic?
I would say, again, create a budget, do not overspend. When we look at cars, the price of cars is going up, the price of gas is going up. And I think we realize the importance of, I think I just can't say it enough, saving your money, not overspending, because, we are in a time where money is tight for a lot of people. And it's not just the working poor.
Well, I think that's all the questions I had. Sid, did you have anything else?
I'm good. Thank you so much, Katrina. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katrina, for leading this program for us. And we'll have it out on YouTube so that we can share it with other people. But we just really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.